We're going to get to the greatest defensive back in Nebraska football history.
You are Locked On Huskers, your daily podcast on the Nebraska Cornhuskers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey gang, DP here, Locked On Huskers. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. We give you that Huskers talk every single day. That's what we're doing for you. I want to thank you for making time, sharing this, subscribe if you haven't, do that. I want to thank the folks from Birddogs. Rico, tell them about Birddogs.
Thanks, DP. Have you ever wondered what life would be like with only one pair of pants or shorts? Well, wonder no more, because Birddogs has the pants for you. They look great, feel great, and will have you looking at yourself in the mirror like, damn! Their comfortable, versatile fabric allows you to wear these to work, on the golf course, or even on a hot date. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege and enter the code LOCKEDONCollege with your order to get a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler, just like mine. Back to you, DP.
Thanks, Rico. Appreciate you, bro. For all of you Husker fans out there, we've been on a journey over past episodes. If you haven't gotten on some of the Mount Rushmore, some of the best of talk, that's what we want to do over the next few episodes, because it allows me to deep dive, and hopefully it drums up some memory or recall for you, or makes you curious about some of the players that stand in line when being when talks of greatest, best ever are had. And we've reached a place in this. Today, we want to focus on the defensive backs. And we reached a place with this theory that if you're going to talk about the best, there's a ton of great Nebraska defensive backs. Great defensive backs. Again, with recent history, with folks who were good enough to play, have longevity at Nebraska, have success at Nebraska, go to the NFL, and have success in the NFL. But as far as Nebraska is concerned, you have to separate from moments to careers. And we've stated quite a bit that the easiest way to get true comparison is to compare the Husker players with their era. How much better were they? Were they elite in their era against their competition? So if you're at this level and everybody else is this level and you're playing at this level, what happens is the accolades start to gather. You get the all-conference selection, you get the all-conference mention, and then above that is the All-American mention, and there's the levels of All-American, that somebody deems you the best in the country at your position, and then most people deeming you the consensus All-American, deeming you the best at your position, and then the unanimous All-American, where all of the credentialed and recognized All-America teams have chosen this Husker player as an All-American, the best at their position, unanimously. And so as you have the conversations about your favorite, now your favorite, that's a you thing. That is your preference. But when you start talking about the credentials of being the best ever, the most recognized, the most celebrated and awarded, then there are 9 Nebraska Cornhuskers who reached All-America status. And we'll go through some of them over the course of this episode. We'll mention them all, but we're going to highlight a few because there's some. And again, one of my favorite things about taking this step in this process, it forces me to deep dive back into past players. Some players are names that I'm less familiar with as Huskers. Some I know as NFL people or professionals after the fact. And not really recognized. And then here's what's really interesting. I mean, a lot of my favorite Husker players, and again, I'm a Washington NFL fan, so a lot of the recognition of players like Pat Fisher and Ron McDowell and, Roy Halou and Brian Davis, and like those are folks who came through. My time in Carolina, where there was just a flood. Mike Minter, Rucker. There was a ton of Husker players. Peter, who came through Carolina when I was there, and so even at that level, right? Those folks who go to a higher level and play at the highest level of football. The recognition that we're going to give today to defensive backs starts with people who were recognized in their time at Nebraska that they were that much better than everybody else their year who played their position. And that can be said for 9 players. And if you go back in time, look, the first one, the best part of it is that you get recognized. You get to recognize what the history is. And the first Nebraska defensive back All-American, the very first, was 1966. Larry Wachholtz, Wachholtz, Larry Wachholtz. And so then you're asked to dive into it. So here's some of what this was. And Wachholtz played safety. Was from North Platte at 5'8", 163 pounds, giving hope to the little dudes all over the state of Nebraska. Attaboy, Larry. He was the Tom Novak Award winner here at Nebraska, first team All-American, first team All Big 8. He had another year where he was second team All-American, and then actually 2-time All Big 8 player, and is in the Nebraska Hall of Fame. So then you get into he's tied with for number 46 on Nebraska's all-time tackles list. And the numbers have stayed, since 1966. So, the story is that he had 15 offers, chose to be to be a Husker. Back then, in 63, freshman couldn't play on the varsity squad. So he didn't, he could have been great enough to have extra years, but wasn't allowed. He was a versatile player, played safety, returned punts, also kicked PATs and field goals in his junior years. First 2 all Big Ten selections, as we said, elected as co-captain his senior year, led the Big 8 in punt return yards again, finished his career with 788 punt return yards, 8 field goals, 11 pass interceptions, including 7 in 1967. That's like, there are some dudes. There are some dudes. Again, the beauty of this for me is that it takes me into a deeper level of what Nebraska football comes from, who some of the people are. Again, Larry Wachholtz, North Platte. Bravo to you. We'll put a pin there and come back to it. Now we'll go. The next player, the next defensive back All-America is not a name that I'm that familiar with. So I had to deep dive for you. More Locked On Huskers when we come back. Hey, gang, welcome back. Locked On Huskers. Again, thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Huskers football talk each and every single day here on Locked On Huskers. We thank you. If you have not subscribed, please do. And then if you feel like the content is interesting, intriguing at all, share it. Let folks know what this is. Now, we brought up Larry Wachholtz, who was the first All-American defensive back for Nebraska. Then you have to jump forward quite a bit. Wachholtz in 66. And then you have to spin the wheel forward to 1975. And one of the great names, and quite frankly, one of the top afros in Nebraska football history. There are some great afros. And I think we should do an episode that's just about the best afros in Nebraska football history. But if you're going to have a Mount Rushmore of afros, absolutely on the list is this young man from Fort Pierce, Florida, a 6'2", 204-pound defensive back, Wonder Mons. Wonder Mons. Ended up being 4th-round draft pick of the Steelers. Also played in the CFL, was first-team All-America, and first-team Big 8 in his career at Nebraska. Was a 2-year starter, 3-year letterman. Could run, was exceptional around the ball. 34 tackles, 17 unassisted, covered a fumble, breaking up 2 passes, and blocking a punt. And quite easily one of the 10 greatest afros in Nebraska football history. Like, it's just spectacular. Maybe I'll try to get Rico to slide in a picture of Wonder Mons so we can show the afro that we're talking about. But his actual full name is Wonderful Mons Jr. Come on. Come on. Let's celebrate that. And again, then you get the progression of the game that and this is in 1975. In 1976, there was a consensus All-American in the defensive back for Nebraska. A consensus All-American, which means that everybody, across the country, the majority of them felt like this was one of the best. From Greeley, Colorado, 5'10", 180-pound Dave Butterfield. 1976, first-team All-American. Ended up being drafted by the Jets in the 11th round. Of course, he was all Big Ten. He was all academic Big 8, several-time player of the week, player of the game sort of situation. But he was a big playmaker. Led the Huskers in interceptions and passes broken up. Key moment for him was they held the black shirts held LSU to 60 passing yards, and then the Huskers picked off the final play of the game. But Butterfield showed some scoring flashes. He had an 87-yard punt return for a touchdown. Versatile player, and then I believe he went on to become. Let me make sure that I'm reading this right. He was a business administration major. Well done, Dave Butterfield. That's another name that I didn't know much about before the research and seeking devour information that was required to do these. But there's a player that I didn't hear much about. 1984. I didn't know much about Brett Clark. But from Nebraska City, 6'3", 200-pound safety. First-team All-America in 1984. Had several other Player of the Week, several all Big 8 nominations and awards. But signed with the Tampa Bay Bandits of the USFL, was also drafted by the Raiders in the same year. He was the Huskers team leader in interceptions, passes broken up, fumbles recovery. He had 3 fumble recoveries. Tied school records for broken up passes in a career with 19. Also set a record for defensive backs with 101 unassisted tackles. Okay, Brett Clark. Like this is the thing. There's so much of this that you don't get to hear about or talk about everybody all the time. But my goodness gracious, I had no idea that this was going on. So Brett Clark, bravo. Jump up to 1999, where there's quite the work. From Scottsdale, Arizona, 5'10", 205-pound rover, Mike Brown. Ended up being drafted in the second round by the Bears. Got a grad degree and graduated with a business administration degree, team co-captain, first-team All-America, Jim Thorpe Award candidate, Bronco Nagurski Defensive Player of the Year candidate, Big 12 Defensive Player of the Week several times, Guy Chamberlain Award winner, all those things. But the numbers pop out at you. As a 3-year starter, second on the all-time Nebraska career tackles chart with 287, just behind Jerry Murtaugh with 342. It's also tied for 9th in career interceptions, 5th on the unassisted career tackle list with 137. And this is the thing. That was a loaded back four, back five. Like that, that's pretty talented because Ralph Brown's next to him. And you would think that it would be competitive, and you would think that, accolades sometimes get, you don't get everything that you want to get. But to think that secondary was that deep, that good. There are 4 other All-American defensive backs. Along with Mike Brown, there's Ralph Brown, who, if you wanted to nickname him Big Play Ralph, you can, and they're at big moments in big games. And of all those all-time lists of interceptions, tackles, unassisted tackles, and then winning records over the career, those are conversations you have about both Mike and Ralph Brown. It's there. Josh Bullock's belongs in the elite category of conversation. But if you're going to talk about the unknowns and the known, that there are 2 defensive backs that we haven't talked about yet, that if you're going to set the parameters in the chain of command for who's the best defensive back ever. Now, your favorite, you're not wrong in who your favorite is. You can put in the comments who your favorite of all these all-timers, who you think the best of them is. But there was one who was unanimous, a unanimous All-American. One. There was one. And then there's another that I think the name needs to be shared more. So we'll put a pin there, and we'll come back with the one player who was a unanimous All-America at defensive back for Nebraska. We'll do that when we come back to Locked On Huskers. Welcome back, gang. Thank you for making Locked On Huskers your first watch and listen each and every single day. Greatly appreciate it. Again, if you have not subscribed, please do. If you have comments about it, please put it down in the comment section below. We're at the last 3. And this was one I didn't know much about. So K.O. Craver, who's out of Dallas, Texas, 5'10", 195 pounds, played at a football factory in Texas. But when you hear about you think All-Americans, that you think that the names get shared on a regular basis. And then he stayed around Nebraska. He was assistant coach for the Omaha Beef of Champions Indoor Football. So he's been around, but we don't talk about him enough. And so going forward, I need to track down K.O. Craver. I need to track him down and let his story be told. He played, some years with the Saints, some years with the Winnipeg Bombers as well. Josh Bullock's 6 foot, 205 pound safety. And call what you may, but to have the kind of success he was having at a time where, the game was changing and there were more things required of players in that space. If you're going to play safety in that era, the game was changing. You were going from condensed football in a closet to the spread. For his ability to adapt, to be fluid, to come and run fill, and still be in coverage and take away deep sections of the field, led to his NFL career being a thing. His time in Nebraska puts him in, I think he's in the top 5 defensive backs. No matter how you break it down, Josh Bullock is probably in the top 5 of defensive backs to ever play at the University of Nebraska. But if you're going to talk about the best, simply based on their separation from the rest of defensive backs during their time at the University of Nebraska, whose career and play was so good and so elite that he was a unanimous first-team All-America pick. And again, people within those great 90s teams and those 70 teams and 80s teams, they have their guys who may have played in bigger games and had bigger moments in those big games. And, of course, they had national championships. But when you're talking about the individual play of an individual player in the era that he played in, he was separate and different from everybody else. All of the awards that were in play, right? So whether it was the United Writers, Walter Camp, Rivals, CBS Sports, Sports Illustrated, everybody chose Prince Amukamara as a unanimous All-American. And I'll say this again: he came on the station here in Nebraska and actually disclosed and clarified. No, the actual pronunciation, it wasn't. We through all his career, I know I called him Prince Amukamara, but it's Amukamara, and that's from his mouth. So, if you have issue with it, reach out to him. But it was the nation. Not only was he so good, but he was a part of the Nebraska secondary that was amongst the nation's best. Again, Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, Thorpe Award winner, lockdown corner, and then of course that led to his being drafted in the NFL in the first round, and the last Husker to do that. So as you have the discussions about, again, you can tell us your favorite Husker defensive back. But if you're going to talk about the best of all the players who have ever played defensive back in Nebraska, there was one that was a unanimous All-American. That was Prince Amukamara. It's quite the list, though. Amukamara, Bullocks, Craver, Brown, Clark, Mons, Butterfield, and Wachholtz. Quite the list. Well done, Huskers all. We'll close out this episode of Locked On Huskers with the 3 words that we love so much. Go Big Red.